In this video, I'll be breaking down combat in the tabletop role-playing game Symbaroum. All of this information can be found in the free Quick Start PDF, link in the description, but hopefully this will be an easily digestible rules guide for your table. I'll go over how to start combat, the steps of your combat turn, weapons and armor, and finally, a bit of analysis on what to expect from your Symbaroum combat scenes. Before we dive in, let's take a peek at the handy single-page combat breakdown provided by Symbaroum's rulebooks. There's a lot of text here, but your combat turn is actually pretty simple. You get one movement action, one combat action, any number of free actions, and any number of reactions. Now, let's zoom in a bit. Symbaroum breaks down its game time into challenging scenes and fluffy interludes. Your most common scene will be combat, where your party of adventurers will fight against the monsters and civilized beings of Davakar and Ambria. When a combat scene begins, you'll need to determine if anyone has surprise. This usually requires a discreet versus vigilant test. If anyone surprises their enemy, they get a free attack at the start of their turn. A free attack is something we'll see come up a lot in combat, and it naturally provides a major advantage to whoever gets it. Next, we'll need to know who has weapons drawn and who doesn't. If anyone was surprised, they are automatically considered to not have weapons drawn. Drawing a weapon is usually a movement action. Take a moment to establish where everyone is when you set the scene. Symbaroum works well with theater of the mind, but of course, you can use a tactical map if you prefer. Just know that Symbaroum doesn't express things like move speed and weapon ranges in terms of feet or meters. So the tactical map is less necessary unless you have complicated environmental features or a ton of combatants. We've established the scene, now it's time to set the turns with initiative. Initiative in Symbaroum is static, not rolled. To set initiative, compare all combatants' quick stat. If anyone ties in quick, look next to their vigilance stat. If there's still a tie, break it with a d20. Players may choose to delay their turn in the order on the first round, but afterwards, all turns are set in order. The exact distance of your move rarely matters. What does matter is who can make a melee attack and who can make a ranged attack. To get straight to these points of proximity, your movement action will usually be to reach an enemy and engage in melee combat, take up a flanking position next to an enemy already fighting an ally, move past an enemy to reach another one that stands further away, provoking free attacks from those you move past, withdraw from melee combat, provoking a free attack from those you withdraw from, create a clear line of sight to an obscured enemy, or obscure yourself from an enemy's line of sight. Other movement actions include switching weapons, standing up from a prone position with a successful quick test, and applying a healing item to yourself. Your combat action is the highlight of your turn. It will usually be making an attack, using a mystical power, or using some other active trait gained from your abilities. You can also replace a combat action with an extra movement action, but you cannot replace your movement action with another combat action. Finally, your combat action can be applying a healing item to an ally. When you make an attack, you try to break your opponent's defense score with your accurate test. There are some abilities like Feint and Iron Fist which allow you to replace accurate with another attribute. Regardless, you must make the d20 roll modified by your opponent's defense. When you are being attacked, you roll your d20 under your defense stat modified by your opponent's accurate or other attack stat. Defense is your quick modified by armor. So let's talk about armor. Each armor has a protection die and an impeding value. The protection is subtracted from damage, and the impeding value is subtracted from defense, as well as sneaking and making rolls for mystic powers. Armor can also be cumbersome, increasing its impeding value by 1, or flexible, reducing its impeding value by 2. A shield increases your defense by 1, but takes up your hand so you can't use larger melee weapons or ranged weapons. A flexible shield keeps the defense bonus but allows the use of your shield hand. In general, with heavier armor, you will take more hits but take less damage from each hit. Wearing no armor means you have total freedom of movement and defense, but you will take full damage from any attack that hits you. Once an attack is successful, damage is applied. A player will roll their damage die and subtract the enemy's armor. In most cases, weapons determine the damage die. Weapons can be heavy, long, projectile, single-handed, shield, short, throwing, or unarmed attacks. There are also some special weapon qualities that apply different rules. Long weapons grant a free attack when an enemy without a long weapon first approaches you. Balanced weapons provide +1 defense. Deep impact weapons deal +1 damage. Jointed weapons are weird. Even if the defense roll is successful, the attack still deals 1d6 damage if the defense roll was an odd number. This 1d6 is not affected by any other passives or abilities. Precise gives +1 to attack tests. And short weapons can be drawn as a free action and can be used with the feint ability. Successful damage is subtracted from the character's toughness. If the damage is greater than the target's pain threshold, they will either fall down or take a free attack. This is always the player's choice whether they are the ones receiving damage or dealing damage over the pain threshold. Once a player is brought to 0 toughness, they are dying, cannot take any actions, and must make death tests with a d20 on their subsequent turns. 1 means the character wakes up with 1d4 toughness. 2 through 10 means the character remains at death's threshold. 11 through 19 means the character is 1 step closer to death. After 3 of these rolls, the character dies. And 20 means the character dies immediately. Toughness is fairly difficult to recover in Symbaroum. Natural healing only restores 1 toughness per day. Alchemical herbal cures heal 1 point of toughness immediately. The Medicus ability heals 1d4 toughness or more with herbal cures, but only once per character per day. Mystical powers such as Lay on Hands and the recovery ability both heal toughness. Those are the basics, so let's add a couple extra rules. When a player has advantage on an attack, they receive a +2 on attack tests and +1d4 on successful damage rolls. Situations that provide advantage include attacking an unaware enemy, attacking a flanked enemy by having 2 players stand on opposite sides, attacking an enemy on the ground with melee weapons, attacking an enemy on lower ground, such as enemies climbing up a ladder. We won't be getting into all of the potential effects of mystic powers here, but it is worth going over the basics of corruption. Magic in Symbaroum is dangerous, and mystics who use their powers are walking a tightrope to enact their will upon the world. Corruption starts at 0 and grows as the character is tainted. If the corruption value reaches a character's total resolute score, they become an abomination and cease to control their character. Temporary corruption fades away by itself at the end of a scene. Actions that give temporary corruption include using a mystic power or ritual, 1d4, using tainted artifacts, varies, but usually 1d4, damage taken from certain abominations, and dark areas of Davokar can give 1d4 or 1d6 temporary corruption. Permanent corruption marks a lasting alteration of the character's essence and inner being. When permanent corruption reaches the character's corruption threshold, the character counts as blight marked and receives a permanent stigma. Permanent corruption is suffered when binding to an artifact, 1 corruption or 1 experience. Learning a new mystic power or ritual, 1 corruption. A character's total corruption reaches the character's corruption threshold during a scene. 1d4 permanent corruption. Combat in Symbaroum is quick and brutal, with toughness being between 10 and 15 regardless of the usual levels seen in other RPGs, but damage being between 1d4 and 1d12 and augmented by special passives and abilities. Characters and monsters often go down in 2 to 3 hits. Even tanky characters can't withhold much punishment without consequence because minor wounds are a major inconvenience in the grander scale of the adventure. Other RPGs may rely on several combat encounters in the adventuring day, but in Symbaroum, just one combat scene in a day can be deadly. 2 or 3 scenes in a day requires you to have healing abilities or items available in your party. Still, permanent death is hard enough to come by. There are no rules for taking damage while dying, so the only way to permadie is to fail your death tests. Taking multiple turns dying is still not fun, but in most cases, the character earned their spot on the ground through their decision making prior to and during the combat scene. Monsters in Symbaroum are classified as weak, ordinary, challenging, strong, or mighty. Because of the limits on toughness, even mighty monsters can easily crumble when they face a party of adventurers alone. Player abilities are powerful, especially when combined in competent combinations, and that is intended by the system. In order to make truly challenging combat scenes, game masters will need to use multiple enemies, diverse enemy types, dangerous environments, or some combination of the three. Combat in Symbaroum is intended to last only 2 to 3 turns. This allows an emphasis to be put on the setup of your combat scenes. Try to focus on aspects like surprise, terrain advantage, and character motivation as you enter the combat scene rather than relying on the drama to come from the scene itself. Cool and unexpected things will still occur as a result of your player's tactical decision and the rolls of the dice, but they won't have as much impact if the encounter is random without justified setup. When planning a combat scene, bear in mind the relevant factions at play, as well as how the scene will advance the party's or individual character's goals. Good action progresses the story. Bad action pauses it. That's all for now. Thanks for watching. Next, we'll be looking at the power ranking of all 36 core abilities. Until then, have a nat 1 day. Bye bye.